Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's episode is going to be about having faith, and we're going to be reading the first chapter of Job. For those of you guys who do not know, Job was a righteous man who did all good, no harm. He was a very prosperous man who had so much cattle, who had a lot of children, who was considered wealthy in the book. For those of you guys who have not read the book of Job, I highly recommend it, especially for those who are struggling with having faith and struggling with just finding security in God and trusting His plan for your life. I do have my Bible here for reference and another book that I highly encourage, Letting God Be God, which talks about the story of Job. So, Job was profoundly wealthy. He had a lot: cattle, land, and kids. So to give you guys a preview of what the book of Job is, he was a very righteous man who was considered, I don't want to say favored by God, but he was just very, very prosperous, for better lack of words. And Satan came to God and said the reason as to why, these people are admiring you and worshiping you is because you have not taken things away from them, or you have not given them sorrow or made them go through harsh things. And so for better lack of words, God allowed Satan to go into Job's life and cause the most detrimental things in order to conclude Satan's idea of, if bad happens, then he's going to curse your name. And God was like, no, Job is a righteous man who is not going to curse my name, and yada yada yada. So there's a little snippet. So let's go into the first chapter. We're just going to read the first chapter for today just because I do want to go into depth. So the first book of Job, Job's character and wealth. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless. He was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send an invite to their 3 sisters to eat and drink with him. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. Starting in verse 6, we're going to talk about Satan being allowed to test Job. Now, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side?" And a hedge as in like tribulations, because Job was a blameless man. I feel like he really was just so prosperous and wealthy that he had no reason as to, steer away from God or curse God in any way. And which is true for a lot of us in this life, because when life is going so good, we really forget about God. It's only when we're going through trials of hardship and tribulation that we turn to God. And I feel like this book is a perfect example of what it means to genuinely trust in the Lord. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse your face. And that's Satan telling God that he's only like that because you haven't given him anything to worry about or cry about. And the Lord said to Satan, Behold all that he has in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord, and everything gets taken away from Job to test his faith and trust. Satan takes Job's property and children. So remember, in the first couple of verses, he possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke, 500 female donkeys, 7 sons and 3 daughters. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sebans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, The Father of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have come to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, The Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of a sword, and I alone have come down to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came down another and said, Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's whole house. And behold, a great wind came across, which I think was a tornado. I think I've read something about that. Came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. He got into a state of vulnerability and got down on his knees and worshipped. And he said, Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Job's faith and trust in the Lord did not fade given the circumstances. And that's only the first chapter, which is so deep, because I cannot imagine a life losing my parents. If I had kids, losing all my kids, losing everything that I have had and everything that I have labored and worked for. Just imagine that, losing so much, a great portion of your life, and being absolutely alone and having the willingness to strip yourself and shave your head and get down on your knees to worship, even in the midst of tribulation. Like, that only tells me the character of Job and how much he went through and still get down on his knees in vulnerability and worship the Lord. So in my book, Let God Be God, I did want to mention a few things that I did learn, and I wanted to point out that we all know that God is all loving and powerful, right? And we question a lot in this life, why do good things happen to bad people? And in this case, it's important to acknowledge the fact that even though Job was a righteous man who did no evil, who was an amazing man, a really good man, he was still stripped from his I don't want to say identity, but stripped from everything he possessed in his life. And I think, we wonder in those, phases in our lives when we're in the middle of trial and tribulation where we question where God is, and throughout the chapters and throughout other books in the Bible, I've noticed that God is with us the most during trials and tribulation, because we are presented with these situations and circumstances not always given by God himself. In many cases and throughout everything that's going on in the world, that's Satan. That's him causing all this destruction. That's him causing all these hardships. That's our sinful nature. And many times, 9 out of 10 times, God uses those situations to his advantage to help us draw near him. We cannot rely on the world to feel safe and secure. The world can be going absolutely great, and it's always within those moments where we feel empty and when we feel defeated that we really genuinely seek God. And I feel like this story is a really good depiction of what it means to have full faith and trust in God, and that's why it's one of my favorites. Ecclesiastes is one that we're gonna read next, but this man had just had a wounded spirit who desperately struggled with losing everything that he had, and we typically question God himself, like why did Job have to go through everything if he was a righteous man? We begin to question, why do evil, bad people always end up living prosperous lives, who are always so wealthy with a high status and have everything, and the meek and the poor end up suffering through a lot of stuff. And there's just a lot of questions that we are always going to want answers for. But Satan and his arrogant strides tested God and told God, Job is only like that because you have given him everything. And God, knowing God, Job's spirit and his faith, said, you know what, go ahead and test him. So it's really encouraging for the most part to know that a lot of the times God does allow these circumstances and hardships and tribulations to happen in order to strengthen our spirit and help us draw near to him, and being a follower of Christ, I think it's important to understand that we're going to suffer. We live in a fallen world where it's very hard to just not encounter trials and tribulation. I feel like there's always going to be someone who's going to be in pain or hurt. We all come from different forms of adversity, but God is the ultimate, and God is the one who's going to be able to hold our hands and be there for us even when it seems like he's not there. And that is the first chapter of Job. I hope you guys liked it. I wish I could have gone into more depth, but I know that I will continue going on a tangent and get ahead of myself and talk more about the upcoming chapters, but I want to make sure I take my time with this. So by all means, I hope you guys enjoyed this video in some way, shape, or form. Like it, please, or share it. I really want to make sure that I talk about faith with you guys and talk about God, and I want to try to glorify God as much as I can with this channel. And by all means, you guys have the most blessed day and week and month and year, and lean on the Lord with all your heart. my favorite quote or verse from the Bible is, lean on the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. That is so good. We cannot rely on ourselves, our own self-interest, our own ideas and goals and aspirations. We will do everything according to God's will, and we will live a prosperous, harmonious, peaceful life. It's just a part of surrendering to his will and plan. But without further ado, please like this video. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys would like me to film any other videos. Tomorrow I'm going to try to film chapter 2. So, yeah, you guys have a good night.